I was living alone in an apartment in Fort Collins, Colorado. I was 24 at the time and had recently started dating a girl named Alyssa, whom I met through a mutual friend at a local coffee shop. She was sweet, quiet, and attractive in a mysterious way. Let me know in the comments, what time are you listening to us and where are you tuning in from? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Everything started off normal. We hung out a lot, watched movies together, and went hiking in the foothills. Just regular dating stuff. But after a few months, things started to feel strange. Alyssa was very private about her past and didn't like to talk about her family or friends. She said she didn't keep in touch with them anymore. At first, I didn't really question it. I figured maybe she had family problems or something she wasn't ready to talk about. I respected her privacy and didn't press her. But over time, her behavior began to make me uncomfortable. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me when she thought I wasn't looking, with an intense and unreadable expression. I tried to laugh it off, but it never felt quite right. She also started showing up at my apartment at odd times, sometimes really late at night, without calling or texting first. I'd see her just sitting in her car outside, waiting silently until I noticed her. When I asked why she didn't let me know she was coming, she'd just shrug and say she liked surprising me. But it didn't feel like a sweet surprise. It felt weird and unsettling. One night I woke up around 3 a.m., unable to sleep. I got up to grab a glass of water, and when I passed by the front window, something caught my eye. Alyssa's car was parked across the street, no lights on, no engine running, just sitting there quietly. I could barely make out her silhouette in the driver's seat, staring directly at my window. I felt instantly uneasy. My instincts told me something was wrong, but I tried to calm myself down and reason that maybe she was just very attached. I went back to bed thinking I'd bring up some boundaries the next day. That afternoon, I casually mentioned it to her, and she acted like it was no big deal. She even seemed amused and just said she missed me. I let it go again, even though I felt more uneasy. Things got weirder quickly. A week later, I came home from work and found her sitting on the stairs outside my apartment. She looked anxious and jumpy. Before I could ask anything, she stood up quickly and told me I needed to come with her right away. She kept saying it was important, but wouldn't say why. She kept urging me toward her car, which was parked on the curb. Something in me said not to go. I hesitated, feeling confused. She had never acted like this before. When I told her firmly that I wasn't going anywhere unless she explained what was happening, her face changed. Her nervous look turned into a cold kind of anger. Without saying anything else, she turned around, got in her car, and sped off. I stood there shaken, wondering what that was all about. After that strange encounter, I decided I needed some distance from Melissa. But before I could say anything to her, I got a strange text 2 days later from an unknown number. It said, "Stay away from Alyssa. She's not who you think she is." My heart was racing. I replied right away asking who it was, but I never got an answer. Feeling more nervous, I tried to call Alyssa, but her phone went straight to voicemail. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I was lying in bed wide awake when I heard footsteps approaching my apartment door. I froze. I could hear someone trying to quietly turn the doorknob. When they realized it was locked, they left without a sound. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. I saw Alyssa hurrying into a car parked a block away. There were two other people inside waiting for her. A chill ran through me. The next morning, I started searching online, desperate for answers. I dug into Alyssa's social media profiles. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but when I searched her name more thoroughly, I came across an old news article from Nebraska that was 2 years old. That's when I found out Alyssa wasn't her real name. Her real name was Leah. The article talked about a kidnapping ring that targeted young adults around Omaha. They used young women to lure victims into cars. Leah was one of the people arrested but released due to lack of evidence. The gang had moved, and Leah, now going by Alyssa, had ended up in Colorado. My blood ran cold. I realized I had come dangerously close to being one of their victims. I panicked and called the Fort Collins police immediately. I told them everything I had found. They took a report and said they would look into it. They told me to stay cautious, keep my doors locked, and avoid contact with her. For the next few days, I barely slept. I kept looking out the window, feeling paranoid even inside my apartment. I didn't see Alyssa or her car again. Slowly, my anxiety started to settle. But just when I thought things were calming down, I got another message from a different unknown number. It said, "You shouldn't have told the police." Big mistake. My stomach dropped. That night, I quickly packed a bag and went to stay with a friend in Loveland. I couldn't spend another night alone in that apartment. Even at my friend's place, I felt scared. Every time headlights passed the windows, I froze, sure they had found me. I never saw Alyssa again, but months later I read another news story, this time from Fort Collins. 3 people were arrested in a kidnapping attempt involving a college student. Leah's picture was in the article, along with 2 men I didn't recognize. They had tried to kidnap someone near my old apartment, but someone nearby stepped in and the police showed up in time. The creepiest part was in the police report. They found pictures and personal details of several people on the suspects' phones, people who had been targeted. My name was on that list. They had been planning something for weeks. I moved out of Colorado not long after that, needing to start over far away. Now I live in a small town in Idaho, but I still double-check my locks and glance over my shoulder when I'm out alone at night. I constantly question the intentions of new people I meet, never fully able to trust them. Because even though Leah or Alyssa, or whatever her real name is now behind bars, the fear of how close I came to vanishing without a trace still haunts me. This incident happened to my mom when she was 19. She worked at a small PCO and STD call office, a little place that didn't need many workers. Her boss had a main office connected to the PCO since his main work was real estate. My mom worked mostly alone and had started the job during her college break. Her shift started in the morning and ended in the evening, around 5 or 6 p.m. One day while she was working, a man came in. He looked like he was in his late 50s, had white hair and a white beard, and was wearing a navy blue shirt. The front of the office was glass, so you could easily see in and out. The man came in to use the PCO and then came up to my mom's desk, starting a casual conversation. He asked if she was related to the boss, and when she said no, he began complimenting her, saying she was beautiful and looked well-educated. He then told her that she didn't need to work in such a small place and said he could get her a job at a well-known bank nearby. He said he had some good connections there. He introduced himself and asked her to bring her resume to his house so they could talk more about her education and job options. My mom didn't feel comfortable going to his house, but he mentioned his sick father and a servant who helped around the house. He said the house was just across the street, in a newer building where mostly rich people lived. Trusting him, she agreed to visit after her shift ended. Before leaving, he gave her his phone number and told her not to tell anyone at work about their chat. That seemed reasonable to her, since she didn't want her boss to think she was planning to quit. That evening after her shift, my mom crossed the road and went into the building where the man said he lived. She saw him standing with a middle-aged woman and 2 school-aged kids who looked like they had just returned home. At first, she wasn't sure it was the same man. His hair and beard were dyed black now, and he was wearing a different shirt. But then he waved at her. He introduced her to the woman, and they all talked kindly, which made my mom think the woman was his wife and the kids were theirs. They all walked into the building and got into the elevator together. The man pressed the button for his floor. My mom didn't see which button the woman pressed. When the elevator stopped on the fourth or fifth floor, the woman and kids got out. My mom assumed it was their floor and was about to step out, but the woman laughed and told her it wasn't. My mom realized then that the woman wasn't his wife. She quickly stepped back into the elevator. The man started talking about how he worked in Dubai and mostly stayed out of the country because of his job. When they reached the ninth floor, he stepped out and my mom followed. She saw two or three kids playing in the open corridor outside the apartments. The man walked to the door nearest the elevator, unlocked it, and asked my mom to come inside. She noticed the kids were still playing outside. The living room was clean, with white walls, an L-shaped couch, a TV, a teapot, a cold drink bottle, and a packet of hair dye with a brush, as if someone had just dyed their hair. The man asked if she was okay with him closing the door. My mom politely said she'd prefer to keep it open. He agreed. He then offered to show her the house before they discussed the job. She agreed, and he led her through a doorway next to the sofa into a hallway. My mom saw that the lights in the house were all off, except for the living room. The man opened a door on the left and said, "This is the bedroom." She peeked inside and saw a dark room with closed windows and a bed. But she also noticed what looked like a camera stand set up in front of the bed, which made her feel uneasy. She didn't see his father or the servant he talked about. When she asked about them, he said they had gone to the doctor. That seemed strange. If he knew they wouldn't be around, why ask her to come then? Feeling more nervous, she told him they should talk about the job now and walked back into the living room without finishing the house tour. The man brought a chair from inside and sat down in front of her. He asked my mom if she wanted the cold drink that was in the teapot. She politely said no, but he insisted and went inside, possibly to the kitchen, carrying the cold drink bottle while still chatting about random things like whether my mom liked his home. He came back with two glasses filled with the cold drink and offered one to my mom. She accepted the glass but didn't drink from it. He encouraged her to take a sip, but she told him she'd drink it later, which she never did. After that, he started talking about his job in Dubai, saying he had lived in a much larger flat there. He also mentioned how strict the rules were in that country, but my mom wasn't really listening. She was starting to feel more and more uncomfortable with the situation. Then, in the middle of talking about Dubai, he suddenly grabbed her hand to show how they punish thieves there by cutting off their arms. That touch wasn't necessary and made her panic inside. She knew something was wrong and prayed quietly, hoping for a way to escape. The man then got up and walked toward the door, talking about the automatic doors in his Dubai apartment. My mom wanted to leave, but he was standing too close to the door and could have easily shut it before she could get out. The kids playing outside wouldn't have even noticed anything since they were too busy and they were just little kids. That's when she realized that going to his place had been a huge mistake, but she also thought it might be too late to fix it. Then something unexpected happened. Two doors across the hallway suddenly opened, and two women, probably the mothers of the kids playing outside, came out and started calling their children. They saw each other and began chatting near the man's door. This surprise gave my mom the opening she needed. The women must have distracted him or maybe even noticed my mom. She quickly walked out, saying, "I'm getting late and need to get home on time, or my mom will kill me." She didn't wait for the elevator. She rushed down the stairs. The man tried to stop her, but she told him she'd meet him the next day, which was a lie. When she finally got home, she chose not to tell anyone and tried to forget it. The next day, she was scared to go to work. But something strange happened. Her boss, who usually stayed in his office, came out and asked her if she had met the man from the day before. She admitted she had. He asked if the man had done anything inappropriate, and she said no. After a few more questions, her boss warned her to stay away from him, saying the man wasn't a good person and she should never visit his place again. She agreed. She still doesn't know how her boss found out, or if he knew the man personally. That shift passed without anything strange happening. But on her way home, she saw the man standing outside his building, like he was waiting for her. She avoided him, but he spotted her and sent his servant to stop her since he wasn't quick enough. The servant tried to talk her into seeing the man again, but she refused and got into a taxi. She decided to quit the job since her vacation was ending anyway. A few years later, she saw a news article about an old man in his 60s who had been arrested in another city. He was accused of drugging and assaulting a young girl and had a history of doing this to others, including recording his victims to blackmail them. It was the same man. When she found out that all his victims had been girls around her age, early 20s, she was horrified. But she didn't talk about it until after she got married to my dad. She finally told me this story just last year. She still feels lucky that those women showed up at the right time and saved her from something awful. Before we dive into the next story, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon so you don't miss any of our upcoming scary stories. Your support means everything to us, so please share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks. This story happened to me and my sister Jessica 20 years ago, and I'm only sharing it now because she passed away recently, and I want to tell this story in her memory. 2 years after our parents got divorced, I finally decided to move out of my mom's house and live with my dad and sister in a rural part of southern Maine. My dad owned a large piece of land surrounded by thick forest. The house was 2 stories tall with a basement, attic, and a wraparound porch. Even though it looked beautiful, it had been built to suit my stepmother, a harsh woman who made our lives miserable growing up. She was cruel in the way she treated us, mostly emotionally, though there were times she was physically abusive too. Every visit to that house used to fill us with dread and anxiety. Thankfully, my dad divorced her while I was still in high school. My sister moved in with him right away after the divorce. I waited until I finished school. At first, I thought the house would feel different without my stepmother, but once I moved in, I realized something else still felt wrong. My bedroom was next to my sister's on the second floor. The only way to reach the attic was through her room. The attic was dark, unfinished, and we hardly ever went in there. Not long after I moved in, strange things started happening. We began hearing odd noises coming from the attic at night. At first, it sounded like quick, tiny footsteps moving around above us. My sister and I joked that it must be gnomes and laughed nervously, trying to shrug it off. When we told our dad, he said it was probably rats or squirrels. But the strange sounds didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. At first, it was just the footsteps. Soon after, doors around the house began opening on their own. Many nights I'd be watching TV or reading in the living room when I'd suddenly hear a faint creaking noise, followed by a door slowly swinging open upstairs. Whenever I checked, I'd find nothing. Just an empty hallway and no reason for the door being open. One night stood out more than any other. My sister and I were watching TV downstairs around midnight. She got tired first and decided to go to bed. I stayed back to finish the show. About 10 minutes later, I clearly heard slow footsteps coming down the stairs. I thought it was my sister, so I didn't pay much attention. But then I heard the basement door creak open. That confused me. I walked over to the basement and called out to her, asking if she needed anything. There was no answer. My heart began to race. I flipped on the basement light and looked down the stairs. No one was there. Feeling scared, I quickly shut the door and made sure it was locked. I decided it was best to just go to bed. My bedroom door was always tricky. It got stuck because the house had settled weirdly, so it took effort to close it properly. That night, I made sure to shut it tight before getting into bed. I had left my window slightly open for fresh air, trying to relax and not think too much. But a little after 1 a.m., I woke up suddenly. I heard loud footsteps on the stairs. This time they were heavier and faster. I sat frozen as the steps moved down the hallway toward my sister's room. Her door creaked open, then slammed shut. My heart was pounding. A second later, I heard the footsteps rushing back toward my room. Then out of nowhere, something or someone slammed hard against my door. It banged loudly and shook in its frame. I jumped out of bed, too scared to even move. The footsteps ran back toward my sister's room. I heard the attic door fling open and fast footsteps going up into the attic. I stared up at the ceiling, terrified, as the sounds moved across the attic floor right above me. Then came a loud thud, like someone had jumped down onto the porch roof. I ran to my window, slammed it shut, and locked it. I looked outside, hoping to see what it was, but the night was too dark. All I saw was moonlight on the roof shingles. Just then, I heard my sister at my door. Her voice was shaky as she asked, "Are you messing with me?" I opened the door quickly. She looked scared too. "No, are you messing with me?" I asked. She shook her head quickly. She told me the loud banging on my door had woken her up. She'd heard her bedroom and attic door open, followed by running footsteps. She was too scared to move and had hidden under her blanket until things went quiet. We couldn't sleep that night. We sat on my bed together waiting for morning. The next day we told our dad, but he still didn't believe us. He kept saying it was probably animals or just old house sounds. Frustrated, we decided to take action ourselves. We put a lock on the attic door and started locking our bedroom doors every night. I also stopped leaving the window open. After that night, things slowly started to calm down. Sometimes we still heard soft creaks or light footsteps, but nothing terrifying ever happened again. Still, the uneasy feeling stayed. It always felt like we were being watched when home alone at night. A year later, our dad said he wanted to sell the house. My sister and I were relieved. As much as we liked the big property, we just didn't feel safe there. A young family eventually bought the place. They didn't seem to know anything about the house's past. We packed up and left. Our new house was closer to town, smaller and much simpler. From the very first night, it felt peaceful. No more scary footsteps, no more doors opening by themselves. Things started to feel normal again, and we finally slept in peace. Years later, I spoke to a neighbor from that old neighborhood. I asked her if she knew anything strange about the house. She was hesitant at first, but then told me that before my dad bought the land, it belonged to an old woman who lived alone and was known for her strange and angry behavior. People said she wasn't well mentally and had died mysteriously in the small cottage that used to stand there. Locals believed her spirit still haunted the area, but my dad never believed those stories. Even now, whenever I think about that night, it still gives me chills. My sister and I don't talk about it much. We'd rather leave it all in the past. I started babysitting for the Morales family in Denver, Colorado, back in February of 2020. At the time, I was working part-time as an admin assistant at a small logistics company in Lakewood. My boss, Mark, was honestly one of the kindest people I'd ever worked for. He always let me clock out early if I needed to grab groceries, never questioned my lunch breaks, and sometimes even surprised me with coffee in the mornings. It was one of the rare jobs where I actually felt appreciated, which was such a relief because I'd had some really stressful jobs before. Since Mark was so easygoing about my schedule, I decided to pick up an extra job as a babysitter. I figured I could use the extra money to help pay off my student loans. That's how I started working for Mr. Morales a few nights each week. He was a single dad named Jonathan whose wife had died in a car accident the year before. Since then, he had been raising his 4-year-old daughter Bella all by himself. Jonathan worked long hours at an IT company downtown, so he needed someone trustworthy to watch Bella when he stayed late at work. Bella was a bright and curious little girl who loved coloring and her stuffed animals. She had a big vocabulary for her age and was always full of questions. Every time I came over, she'd run to me with a huge smile and either show me a drawing she made or ask if we could bake cookies together. On this particular night, March 4th, if I remember right, Jonathan had a big project due at work. He apologized as he rushed out the door around 6 p.m. and said he probably wouldn't be back until after midnight. I told him not to worry. I'd take care of Bella and make sure she had dinner and was in bed on time. We had a normal evening, coloring animals, building things with her blocks, and watching a short kids show before bed. Bella seemed more cuddly than usual, asking for extra hugs and sitting on my lap more. I figured she was just missing her dad, or maybe even her mom, though she didn't really talk about her mom much. Around 8:30, after her bath, I brought her up to her room. The ceiling was decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars, and she kept yawning, so I tucked her into bed, read her a quick story, and told her goodnight. About half an hour later, I was downstairs flipping through channels on the TV when I suddenly heard Bella calling out from upstairs. Her small voice echoed down the hall, so I put the remote down and went to check on her. She was standing near her window pointing outside. "Bella, what's wrong?" I asked gently. She looked up at me with a scared face and said, "There was a man outside." He was staring at me through the window. I tried to stay calm and reassure her. "Honey, there's no one there," I said, and took a quick look outside. The backyard had a motion-activated light, and it was on, but I didn't see anyone. The neighborhood was pretty quiet, full of middle-class families and tidy lawns, not the kind of place where people would sneak around in backyards. Bella still looked really shaken, so I walked her back to bed and told her it was time to sleep. I promised I'd take a better look in a minute. She asked me to close the curtains all the way, and after I did, she finally laid down. Back downstairs, I felt a little uneasy. Bella wasn't the type to make up scary things just for attention. Still, I figured maybe she saw a shadow or got spooked by a raccoon or something. Just to be sure, I checked both the front and back doors to make sure they were locked. Then I sat back on the couch, keeping the TV volume low and trying not to worry too much. But less than 15 minutes later, I heard Bella crying upstairs. It wasn't a soft whimper. It was the kind of crying that comes from real fear. My heart started racing as I ran up the stairs, almost tripping at the top. I found her sitting up in bed with tears on her face and wide, terrified eyes. "He's back," she sobbed. "He's looking at me." I looked at the window. The curtains were closed, but a tiny gap let me see a sliver of outside. It looked quiet and dark. I stayed calm for Bella's sake, but my hands had already started shaking. If she was this scared, something had definitely frightened her. I hugged her tight and whispered that everything would be okay. Then, feeling a mix of fear and anger, I decided to check around the outside of the house. If someone was really out there, I wanted them to leave. I grabbed a kitchen knife. It probably sounds like too much, but in that moment, it felt like the right thing to do. I opened the back door and stepped into the cold air. My breath came out in little white clouds. The yard was still, surrounded by a tall fence. The motion sensor light clicked on, showing a few toys scattered on the grass and tree branches swaying in the breeze. I walked along the side of the house, checked the windows, looked in the driveway, even behind the trash cans. I didn't see anyone. I felt a little better and came back in through the back door, locking it carefully behind me. Just as I turned the deadbolt, I heard a loud rattling sound at the front door. Someone was trying to open it. My heart jumped. I ran to the front door and looked through the peephole. The hallway light was off, so it was hard to see, but there he was, a tall man, maybe in his 40s, in dirty jeans and a stained hoodie. His face was turned partly away, but I could see his hair was messy and his eyes looked wild, like he wasn't fully there. Time seemed to slow down. I held the knife so tight my hands started to hurt. He began banging on the door, making it shake. I could almost hear Bella's breathing upstairs, even from that far away. I swallowed and yelled that I was calling the police if he didn't leave. The banging stopped. There was silence for a second. Then he started twisting the handle harder, like he was really trying to get in. I reached for my phone in my back pocket, my fingers shaking. I finally managed to dial 911 and told the operator what was going on, my voice trembling. She told me to stay calm and stay on the line while officers were sent out. I think the man must have heard me say police because suddenly he ran off into the night. I stayed right where I was, frozen, still on the call. A few minutes later, though it felt way longer, I saw flashing lights from a police car outside. When they knocked on the door, my hands were shaking so badly I had trouble unlocking it. When I finally opened the door, Bella ran down the stairs and grabbed my legs, sobbing. The police searched the yard carefully. One of them yelled that they found someone hiding in some thick bushes near the fence. The man was crouched there, kind of curled up, looking confused and mumbling to himself. They handcuffed him and took him away while I stood on the porch, holding Bella and feeling a weird mix of fear and relief. After they arrested him, one of the officers took my statement. He was kind and understanding. Then he told me something that made my stomach turn. The man had escaped from a nearby mental health facility earlier that day. He was known to act strangely and could be dangerous, even though he hadn't used any weapons before. They still weren't sure how he ended up in that neighborhood or why he picked Jonathan's house. Jonathan came home about an hour later and was clearly upset. He hugged Bella tightly and apologized to both of us. Even though it wasn't his fault, he was just thankful that she was okay. The police promised to keep us updated about the man and what would happen next. Bella eventually fell asleep in her dad's bed, still holding one of her stuffed animals. As for me, I couldn't get the image of that man's shadow by the window out of my head. It still gives me chills thinking about how sure Bella was that she saw him, and how when I looked, he was already gone, just waiting for a chance. Even years later, whenever I hear a tap at a window or think I see something move in the yard, I remember that night in Denver. The scariest part is not knowing why he came to that house, or if he even remembers us. Maybe to him, Bella and I were just two random faces in the fog of his confused mind. Ben and I started our YouTube channel, American Urban Explorers, about 6 months ago. We'd driven all over western Pennsylvania, filming empty factories in Aliquippa, the remains of steel mills near Pittsburgh, and broken down houses we found on remote roads. Viewers love the mystery of these old forgotten places, and we love the excitement of finding them. So when we heard people talking about an abandoned elementary school in a small town called Maplewood, just north of the city, we knew we had to check it out. The school, once called Roosevelt Elementary, stood at the edge of town near some train tracks that hadn't been used in years. The paint was peeling, windows were broken, and graffiti covered the brick walls. Locals said it was haunted, especially at night. Some people claimed they saw lights flickering inside even though no one was there. Others said they heard footsteps echoing in the halls. Most people in Maplewood avoided the place completely, but for our channel, it seemed like the perfect place to shoot a spooky exploration video. One cool afternoon in November, we parked our car on a quiet side street far from the school gates. The breeze made dry leaves scrape along the pavement. We packed up our camera equipment, checked the batteries, and headed for the fence that surrounded the property. Barbed wire ran along the top, but someone had already cut a hole in the corner. It looked big enough for us to crawl through. I paused for a second, heart pounding. Something about the building felt strange. The silence was so heavy, like the whole school was holding its breath. But Ben looked excited. He was always the brave one. He gave me a thumbs up and I took a deep breath. We slipped through the gap in the fence and walked to the main entrance. The front doors were boarded up, but one piece of wood was loose, just enough for us to squeeze through. As soon as we stepped inside the front hallway, A strong, musty smell hit us, like mold, rotten wood, and old dust. A narrow beam of sunlight came through the cracks, lighting up the air filled with floating dust. I turned on my flashlight and handed Ben the camera. "Welcome to Roosevelt Elementary," he whispered for the video, panning. The camera moved slowly down the rotting hallway. Our footsteps echoed around us as we walked further in our boots, crunching on broken glass, and trash old lockers stood along the walls. Their doors rusted and bent, some were hanging open with old papers, torn up books, and even a pair of sneakers left behind. One wall had a faded mural of smiling kids playing under a bright cartoon sun, but the paint was peeling and black mold was growing over their faces. A strange, tight feeling filled my chest as I looked at those faded smiles. It was like stepping into a piece of history that had been left behind, both interesting and disturbing. We walked through a few classrooms before finding the main office. The door was partly open, so we slipped inside. Broken computer screens and a mess of wires were scattered all over the dirty floor. A file cabinet had fallen over and papers were spread across the stained carpet. Ben dug through them and found a class roster from the late 90s. It had teachers' names, schedules, and some phone numbers. We took pictures and kept filming. Our followers always loved when we found old records or little details like that. Things that made these abandoned places feel alive again. Then we heard something. A dull thud came from farther down the hallway, and I froze, my heart racing. Ben turned the camera toward the noise, but there was nothing there. Just darkness. A cold shiver crept up my back. Maybe it was a door slamming from the wind, I thought. But there was no wind, no movement at all. "We should check it out," Ben said, trying to stay brave. We carefully walked back into the hallway. The overhead lights had died long ago, so everything was dark. Our flashlights flickered on the cracked walls and worn-down wallpaper. Each step on the old floor echoed loud and empty. Then I heard another sound, a soft scraping noise from around a corner. My stomach dropped. We moved slowly toward it and saw a faint light coming from a classroom at the end of the hall. Ben looked at me, raising his eyebrows. We moved closer, the camera still recording. That's when we saw someone inside. A man was standing there, his back turned to us with only a flashlight or maybe a small lantern. Lighting the room, he wore a dirty jacket and torn jeans, and his hair was messy at first. I thought maybe he was homeless using the building for shelter, but something felt wrong. He stood too still, like he was frozen. Ben stepped forward and cleared his throat softly to let him know we were there. The man turned his face toward us, his eyes wide and unfocused, like he was looking at something we couldn't see. None of us said anything for a second. Then he smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made my skin crawl. He started walking toward us, slow but steady. Ben backed away, holding the camera tight. I wanted to speak, but I couldn't. The man kept coming, so we turned and ran our flashlights bouncing off the walls behind us. I could hear him chasing us, his feet slapping the floor as he ran. We got to the main entrance and stumbled out through a broken part of the boarded-up door, almost falling over each other as we escaped. The light outside was dimming, and the air felt colder. We ran fast toward the fence, our hearts pounding. When we reached the hole in the fence, Ben crawled through first, and I followed. I scraped my arm on a sharp edge of wire. Pain shot through me, but I didn't stop once. We were outside. We didn't look back. We just ran until we got to the car, jumped inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the wheel. Ben looked back at the school, but I couldn't. I just wanted to be away from that building and that man for days afterward. We couldn't sleep well. The video only showed fast, shaky glimpses of the man as we ran. We talked about whether to post it or not. Finally, we shared a shorter version and left out the scariest parts. We called it Abandoned School Nightmare in Pennsylvania, and it became one of the most watched videos on our channel. Later, the police sealed up the building even more and warned people to stay away. A few months after that, the town made plans to tear the school down. Ben and I drove by to watch as the bulldozers started knocking it down. We stood from far away, watching the old bricks collapse. It should have felt like closure, but it only made the memory stronger, like a nightmare that doesn't go away even after you wake up 2 years ago on a cold night in February in Lamar County, Colorado. I was driving to a nightclub to hang out with my guy friends. We had a tradition of going out almost every Saturday unless someone couldn't make it. I usually had fun, but sometimes I felt like I was going just because they expected me to. That Saturday, I spent most of my day at my grandparents' house not far from my home. After a relaxing visit, I went home quickly, showered, got dressed, wore my nicer shoes, grabbed my wallet, phone, and keys, and walked out the front door. I got in my SUV, started the engine, and drove off, heading down my usual road. I didn't know it at the time, but this would be the last time I ever drove a car. The closest highway was about 5 minutes away, and I got on it quickly, keeping up with traffic at about 70 miles per hour. After about 15 or 20 minutes, I noticed a police car on the other side of the road parked in the left lane and facing the opposite direction. I figured the cop was waiting to catch people speeding. I wish that had been the truth, but it wasn't because I was driving an SUV. I couldn't see the ground right in front of me very well. It was also dark, and oncoming headlights kept blinding me. Now and then I kept going at the same speed, listening to music and thinking about the night ahead. Then suddenly I felt a hard bump under my car. My heart dropped instantly. I knew I had hit something big, maybe even a person. My hands shook, and I pulled over to the shoulder and turned on my hazard lights. As soon as I stopped, panic hit me. I couldn't breathe, and tears filled my eyes. I screamed without meaning to, shaking all over. I knew I had to do something, but I couldn't go back the other way. It was a fast highway, and turning around would be dangerous. My hands trembling, I called 911. The operator calmly told me they already knew what had happened. An officer on the scene had reported it. I asked if I should go to the police station, and she said yes. I was barely able to think straight, but I drove carefully to the station. Once there, I filled out forms, wrote a statement, and talked briefly with a police officer who said they'd contact me later. When I left the station, my phone had a bunch of missed calls and texts from my friends wondering where I was. I called my friend Bob and told him everything. He was shocked but kind and told me to take care of myself. When I finally got home, I felt completely drained. I collapsed into bed and fell asleep right away. Over the next few days, I learned more about what happened from the news and the police. The man I hit was named Brent Thompson. He was 28 years old and had some minor run-ins with the law. That night, he was pulled over by Deputy Lorenzo Lujan because his car tags were expired. Brent panicked, gave a fake name, and when the officer found out, he ran. The deputy chased him to the highway and used a taser. Brent collapsed right before I came driving by, and I ran over him by accident. Brent died on the scene, and it broke many people's hearts. His family sued the police department, and the officer, after a long investigation, the district attorney decided the deputy didn't break any laws, and neither did I. No charges were filed, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. My life changed after that. I pulled away from my friends, even though they were understanding. I felt bad for pushing them away. I couldn't bring myself to drive again every time I got near a car. I felt sick. I stopped trying. Altogether, my family and friends drove me when they could, and if they couldn't, I used Uber or buses. I started seeing a counselor to help me deal with the guilt and trauma. Talking about it helped me understand my feelings, but it didn't erase the memory. I still remembered everything so clearly. The sounds, the fear, the moment it happened, and the nightmares didn't stop for a long time. I'd wake up sweating and afraid to face the day to try and heal. I decided to meet Brent's family. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I met his parents and younger sister and told them everything I remembered from that night. I apologized with all my heart. They listened through tears and told me they forgave me. They said they knew Brent had made some bad choices, but losing him still hurt deeply. That moment helped me more than I can explain. Their forgiveness lifted some of the weight I carried slowly. I began to rebuild my life. I stayed close with family and friends and started seeing the value in every day. I began volunteering at local centers and spoke with teens about how their choices matter, hoping to help someone avoid a tragedy like ours. Even with therapy and support, I still couldn't drive again. The fear was too strong, so I moved closer to work. I worked in a small customer support office and found a place near a bus stop and a store. So life became simpler. Sometimes I felt lonely or frustrated that I hadn't fully recovered. Friends gently pushed me to try driving again, but I told them I was okay, living like this, and they respected that over time. The subject stopped coming up. The accident completely changed the way I saw things. Every single day felt like a gift. I learned the value of forgiveness, understanding, and being thankful. Even though I still felt regret, I visited the site 1 year later and left flowers for Brent in his memory. It was a really emotional moment as I stood there quietly, hearing the sound of cars speeding by in the distance. I felt a mix of sadness and hope while thinking about everything I had been through: trauma, guilt, forgiveness, and finally healing. Life doesn't always go how you expect, and it definitely isn't always fair. I had to learn that the hard way. But what I went through taught me some important things: how to be more understanding, more empathetic, and how to be strong when things get hard. I never forgot Brent Thompson. He always stayed in my mind as a reminder of how fragile life really is and how fast things can change. This happened to me when I was in the seventh grade, back in 2016, living in New York City. I had this math teacher named Miss Andre. She wasn't exactly my favorite because I felt like she wasn't very kind to me or our class. Plus, she always gave us way too much homework, like we were in college or something. Anyway, here's where the real story begins. It was a Friday after school, the last day before our week off for President's Day. I was riding home on the school bus, the same one I took every day. We stopped at a red light halfway through the trip. While waiting, I looked out the window, listening to music through my headphones. That's when I saw something strange. My teacher, Miss Andre, was standing on the sidewalk staring straight at me. She looked really tense and serious. It made me feel really weird. I kept thinking, is she following the bus? But that didn't make sense. It was probably just a random thing. Plus, the window was kind of dark, so maybe she wasn't even sure it was me. The light turned green and we drove away. Still, it was odd seeing someone from school out in the city like that. New York is huge, so it felt unlikely. I got home and tried to forget what I saw. The next night, my family and cousins went to New Jersey to see a Muse concert. It was fun at first, but then something really strange happened. In the middle of the concert, I suddenly saw Miss Andre again. This time she was on the actual stage of the Credential Center. She looked just like before, serious, staring straight at me. It was like she had appeared out of nowhere. I figured it had to be a hallucination. If it were real, people around me would have noticed, and security would have removed her. Still, I felt weird. I told myself it wasn't real, tried to relax, and focused on enjoying the music. After a while, she just disappeared again. The next time I saw her was the following Friday. My family went hiking that weekend at Mount Greylock. About 40 minutes into the hike, there she was again, Miss Andre. At this point, I wasn't even scared anymore. It was just getting frustrating. I didn't know how to make these weird visions stop. Then I got an idea. I ran straight toward where she was standing, but when I got there, she vanished into thin air. My family gave me a confused look like I was acting crazy. My mom asked if I was okay, and I just made up something about needing to burn off energy. She said okay, but she still looked suspicious. I didn't want to tell them what I was really seeing. I was too embarrassed, and I didn't think they'd believe me. We kept hiking until we reached the top and camped for the night. The next night, we stayed at an Airbnb. It was a big house, and I had my own room. That night, I fell asleep around 11 p.m. and had a horrible dream. I dreamed that I went back to school after the break, and Miss Andre told the whole class to kill me. I begged them not to, yelling no over and over. Then one classmate pulled out scissors and aimed them at my chest. Right before they could stab me, I woke up, and Miss Andre was right in my face. She was laughing like a maniac and screaming while looking super angry, like she wanted to kill me. I started crying and yelling for my parents. They rushed into my room asking what happened. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I had to tell them everything. The first time I saw her on the bus, then at the concert, during the hike, and now this nightmare. My parents looked terrified. They knew I was serious because I was crying so hard. My dad said he was really sorry and asked, "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" I told him I thought they wouldn't believe me and would think I was making it up. My mom told me I could sleep in their room that night so I could calm down and not be afraid. So I did, and I finally got some rest. The next morning during our drive back to the city, we had a long talk. I told my parents I didn't want to go back to that school. I was afraid that if I stayed, I'd keep seeing Miss Andre and have more hallucinations. I asked to transfer right away. They didn't give me an answer right away. They said they'd decide later that night and that I didn't have to go to school the next day, no matter what they decided. That evening, they told me I could transfer, but only if I agreed to see a psychologist once a week. I said no problem. When I started at the new school, my old friends messaged me on social media and texted asking why I left. I made up a story that my parents wanted me to go to a better school. They all believed it. I kept the real reason just between me, my parents, and my psychologist. Talking to the psychologist really helped. I told them everything, including all the times I saw Miss Andre. They were able to give me medication that helped me stop seeing things that weren't real. It worked. I never saw Miss Andre again, not in real life or in my head. Still to this day, I wonder what caused me to hallucinate her so specifically. I guess it's something I'll never really understand. A few years ago, I used to work in private security in Buffalo, New York. In October, my agency gave me a job watching over this old burned mansion on the edge of town. The place had caught fire years ago and some people had died in the fire. After that, the mansion was left empty, just a wreck with broken windows and a collapsed roof. Some local kids used to say it was haunted, but I didn't believe in any of that. For me, it was just another night job. The estate was huge with a tall iron fence all around it. My job was to walk around the property a few times each night to make sure nobody broke in. At first, it was quiet. I would walk with my flashlight, hearing only the wind through the trees. Then about a week in, I was on duty at around 2 a.m. It was colder than usual, and I could see my breath in the air. I stopped by the front gate and looked up at the mansion. Suddenly, I heard something. It sounded like a cry, sharp and far away. It only lasted a few seconds before stopping. At first, I thought it was an animal, but the sound had a human feeling to it. It made my skin crawl. I pointed my flashlight at the house, but from where I was, I couldn't see anything strange. I thought about going inside, but we were told not to enter alone. The building wasn't safe, and if something weird happened, we were supposed to call the police instead. So I stayed outside, feeling uneasy, waiting for the sun to come up. By morning, I convinced myself it was probably just a cat or the wind playing tricks. But for the next few nights, I couldn't stop thinking about the scream. I kept walking closer to the house, listening harder. Then on a Wednesday, I saw something that gave me chills. While walking behind the house, I looked up at the top floor and saw a faint light flickering through one of the broken windows. It looked like someone was moving around with a flashlight, but that couldn't be. The house didn't have any power, and the top floors had been destroyed in the fire. I froze. I watched the light flicker in and out. Then I saw a figure, a person, just a dark shape, but they were swaying slowly before stepping away from the window. My heart dropped. It was almost 1:30 a.m., and no one should have been there. This time my curiosity was stronger than my fear. I radioed to let dispatch know I was going in. I walked up the old porch steps and pushed the front door open. The smell inside was awful, burned wood, damp, and moldy. I moved the flashlight slowly across the walls and floors. Everything was scorched and broken. As I walked further in, I started coughing from all the dust. Then I heard something move behind me. My whole body tensed up. I turned quickly with my flashlight, but there was nothing, just a torn curtain blowing near a cracked window. I took a deep breath and kept going. But then I felt it, that strange feeling like someone was right behind me. I turned again, flashlight shaking in my hand. There he was, a man, standing there in a hospital gown. Not a ghost or anything glowing, just a real, creepy-looking man with a dirty gown hanging off him. His face was half in the shadows, but I could see the whites of his eyes. I didn't even think. I just ran, crashing into walls, trying to get out of there as fast as I could. I don't even remember breathing. My heart was pounding as I ran for the front door, which was still open. I jumped off the porch steps and grabbed my phone, calling the police. I kept glancing back, half expecting that man to show up in the doorway again, but he never did. The police arrived in a couple of squad cars, and when I explained everything, they looked doubtful, like they'd heard stories like this before. Still, they went along with it and agreed to wait until sunrise to fully check the place. I followed them inside with an older detective named Callahan, who seemed more understanding than the others. We checked all the rooms I had gone through, but nothing stood out right away. After a few hours of looking around, one of the officers found a hidden door behind a fallen bookcase. It led to a staircase going down to the basement. The stairs looked newer than the rest of the house, like someone had worked on them recently. As soon as we stepped down, a strong, awful smell hit us, like mold, wet concrete, and something else I couldn't quite name. Down there, we found 3 men alive and shocked to see us. They were wanted for several robberies in the area. One of them rushed at the police, but they got him under control fast. In the corner of the room, tied to a chair, was another man, gagged and tied up, looking weak and scared. His face was thin, and he had bruises on his arms. That's when it hit me. The screaming I heard the first night probably came from him. He'd been trapped down there yelling for help, while I stood just outside not knowing. The police arrested the 3 men and set the hostage free. As they were leading them upstairs, I noticed none of them were wearing a white gown. They all had on jeans and regular sweatshirts. I asked Detective Callahan if they might have had another partner who got away. He said he wasn't sure. One of the guys admitted they'd been hiding out in that house, but he refused to talk about anyone wearing white. I still think about that moment when I turned and saw the figure. Was it the hostage wearing something strange? Did I see something wrong in the dark? Or was there someone else still hiding? Maybe someone who didn't want to be found. I don't think I'll ever get a clear answer, but every time I drive past that place, with the yellow tape still around it. I remember those eyes in the dark and wonder if the real truth behind that house is much deeper than we know. This happened when I was 18 years old. I was on a trip with my parents and my friend. Let's call her Anna. This happened in Sweden while we were taking a road trip. Me, Anna, and my parents were going on a long drive, about 8 hours from home. The plan was to visit a theme park and sleep at a campsite, but we didn't book any in advance. When we reached the city with the theme park, we planned to go there the next day, so that night we needed a place to sleep. We had tents with us in the car. My dad searched for a nearby campsite and called one, but sadly there was a big soccer tournament that day and all the spaces were full. We should have booked earlier. My dad tried calling other places, but nothing nearby had a good price or available spots. Our only choice left was to camp out somewhere in nature. We set our GPS to take us to the closest free parking area in the forest, so we wouldn't get a ticket. We ended up in a nature reserve. When we got there, there were a few people around, so we asked if it was okay to camp there. A woman who was hiking told us it was fine and that no parking officers came by. We decided to sleep at a small, quiet gravel parking lot surrounded by forest. It was about a 10-minute walk from a beach. At first, we thought about camping at the beach, but something told me it was better to stay near the parking lot. When we got out of the car to set up our tents, I noticed a lonely old car parked farther down. It looked beat up, and I didn't see anyone around. I found it odd since it was late in the evening, and nobody was at the beach or walking in the woods. I didn't think too much about it and helped my parents put up our tents. My parents slept in one tent, and Anna and I shared the other one. They were set up close to each other. Once the tents were done, Anna and I made ours cozy and watched YouTube while eating snacks.
It was around 11 p.m. We didn't want to be too tired the next day, so we planned to sleep soon. Around midnight, our parents were already asleep in their tent. Anna and I were still on our phones scrolling through TikTok when we suddenly heard a loud metal noise outside. It sounded like someone dropped a shovel on the gravel. We both got scared and jumped. We whispered to each other, trying to figure out what the sound was. We stayed quiet, listening carefully, too afraid to look out the tent. The sound came from the direction of that old car. We heard someone throw what I still believe was a shovel into the car's trunk, then slam the trunk shut. We sat in silence as the car suddenly sped off like they were trying to get away. Anna and I were confused and terrified. I messaged a friend who lived near the area and told him where we were staying. He replied that the beach nearby was known to be dangerous, with organized criminals doing illegal stuff there. We had no idea about that before. After he told me, I felt chills all over. It scared me even more. About 10 minutes after the car drove away, we heard a loud, blood-curdling scream from a man somewhere in the forest. It was terrifying. I texted my mom right away and called her to wake her up. I told her about the scream. She hadn't heard it and thought maybe it wasn't serious, but I couldn't think of any reason someone would scream like that unless something bad was happening. Anna and I hid under our blankets, too scared to sleep. Even though we were tired, the fear kept us wide awake. The forest was totally silent again. My heart nearly stopped when I heard footsteps walking quietly around our tents. Slow, sneaky footsteps. Anna and I froze under the blanket. I turned my phone screen off so it wouldn't light up the tent. I could hear my heart beat. It was that quiet. There was no reason anyone should be walking around our tents in the middle of the woods like that. The footsteps moved from our tent to my parents', then to the car. We heard the person stop and stand right outside. Then headlights lit up our tent. The same car was back. Anna and I quickly lay down flat so they wouldn't see us through the tent. I worked up the courage to peek through the small window. The car door slammed shut and they drove off again. I felt a bit safer knowing they were gone. I could see the road clearly from that spot. About 5 minutes later, another car approached fast. It was a police car, heading in the same direction as the old one. Nothing else happened after that. Anna and I were still scared and decided to sit inside our car and lock the doors to feel safer. I stayed awake until about 5 a.m., just staring at the trees. Anna fell asleep next to me. After another hour, we went back to our tent and finally fell asleep because we were just too exhausted. We woke up around 9 a.m., still tired. I told my mom everything that happened. She said she had heard the footsteps too. When the person came near their tent, she even heard heavy breathing, like in those scary movie phone calls. It scared her too, but my dad slept through it all. We told him the story and immediately packed up everything. We left that place as fast as we could. None of us wanted to stay there one more second. We enjoyed the theme park, but later that night I looked up information about that forest. I found out that just a short time before we went, a man had been murdered there, stabbed to death because of gang problems. Also, 2 other men had gone missing at that beach and were never found. I thought back to everything and realized, what if the person walking around our tent was dangerous? What if they were checking if anyone saw what happened? The thought gave me chills. I kept wondering who screamed, why someone was using a shovel in the forest that night, and why the police showed up right after. I had always loved ghost stories. My friends and I would share creepy stories at sleepovers. One night we decided to go even further. We planned to visit an abandoned graveyard on the edge of our small town in western New York. People said it was haunted by ghosts from the early 1800s. No one dared to go there after dark. Being young and curious, we thought it would be fun. It was a chilly October evening when we set out just a few days before Halloween. The sun had already gone down, and the sky was turning dark shades of purple and orange. Before fading completely, we rode our bikes past rows of old Victorian houses, then kept going until we left the streetlights behind. As we got closer, a wooden sign nearly hidden by tall weeds marked the entrance to the place Oakwood Cemetery established in 1812. The letters on the sign were so faded it was hard to read them. The cool night breeze brushed our faces as we parked our bikes near a twisted oak tree. My friend Becca turned on her phone flashlight.